In today's episode of the Profit First For Tradies podcast, what I wanted to talk to you about is the power of small steps and how Profit First can help you take care of your debt and your future. So what I wanted to talk about today is business debt. So any debt that your business is in, so that could be things like ATO payment plans, it could be suppliers that you owe, it could be leases, loans, all of those sorts of things. All the debt of the business is what we are talking about. And I wanted to explain to you how implementing Profit First in your business is going to help you finally get on top of your debt. Now, what I hear all the time is that when the debt's paid off, everything will be better. Once I get the ATO off my back, things will be improved. Next time I get an invoice paid, which will be next week, next month, next quarter, I'll be back up to date and back on track. What I know that you'd prefer, but you aren't sure how to get this, is to be free and clear of all your debt in the business. To not have a payment plan or to not be owing money to the ATO, and to know exactly when you'll be out of debt. So whether that is in 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, having that time frame and knowing exactly when the pain from the debt is going to stop is something I hear from those tradies I talk to all the time. So 3 steps I want to cover off today. Step number 1, we have to get clear on how much debt we actually have. Now, I know this can be a little bit overwhelming and a little bit stressful, but actually knowing exactly what you owe is the absolute critical step to getting on top of your debt. Now, as I said, I understand that this potentially is the hardest step. I know for many of you, you don't have all this information at your fingertips. If you're not the one doing the bookkeeping, you may not have this information. Get your team involved and get them on track to find out how much money is owing on any of those loans or leases, hire purchases, any of those sorts of things. We want to know the balance. We also want to know what the monthly repayment is and the day in which that is due. We also want to be able to create a plan for you. So once you know what you owe, who you owe it to, how much it's going to cost you a month or a payment, and what date of the month that happens, then what we can do is create a plan and map your cash flow out so we can see exactly what you need to have and by when. Now, also I want to highlight here that this includes the little debts. So you're overdue with Telstra, or you're overdue on rent, or anything that you're overdue with, we also want to add that to the list as well. The second step, now you know exactly what you owe. And again, that first step can be a pretty big step. It can be a little bit time consuming, but it is worth the time. So once we know exactly what you owe, what we then want to do is, as I said, I use a cash flow tool with my clients so we can map out what the future looks like. So at the start, we might only map out for the next month, the next 2 months, the next 3 months. Some clients it's much longer, some clients we just keep it in a really short time frame. But we start looking forward. So we start seeing when there's going to be holes in our cash flow. So we start finding when we're going to be short in our cash flow, rather than just wait for it to fall in our lap and, oh, we don't have enough money to pay things this week. We want to start seeing when that is going to occur before it occurs. Now, again, this mightn't feel like a very fun step at this stage, but with the hundreds of clients I've worked with over the years, mapping out your debt and mapping out your cash flow makes a huge difference, because you then have control. You can then see what's going to happen, and then we can start getting to step number 3, which is what I call the fun part, is where we can put things in place to fix the gaps that we've now found because we've started doing the cash flow. So there are many things that we can do to fix those gaps. And sometimes there is just 1 or 2 things we can improve in the business, and that's going to make a huge difference. Most of the time, it's a number of small steps, small tweaks and small changes throughout the business which are going to have the biggest impact. So they could be things like, first and foremost, we always start with reducing your expenses and reviewing your expenses. Now, the reason why I start here is because if you think of a bucket, and we're putting all this water in the bucket, and that water is income. If that bucket has all these holes in it, which is all these expenses that are just like leaking out everywhere that are unnecessary, we want to patch that bucket first before we go and try and earn more money, get more jobs. Getting more jobs is not the first step. The first step is always doing an expense review and making sure we can patch that leaky bucket. If you haven't listened to the episode on expense reviews, then please, in the show notes, you'll see a link. Go back there and make sure you listen to that one, and that'll step you through how I do an expense review with my clients. So once we've patched that leaky bucket, what we then need to do is also make sure your invoicing is up to date. I would say probably 90% of new clients that come on board that have cash flow problems, one of the biggest issues is because they are not invoicing on time. So some clients are doing it a few days after the job finishes, some a few weeks. I've had some that are a few months after the job finishes. Now, if you think about your client, they're not going to be too impressed if they've forgotten about this invoice and then a couple of weeks or a couple of months later, you send them the invoice. It's the quickest way to annoy clients, and it's the quickest way to stop them from referring to you other people and other clients, because they then feel like you were just disorganized. So you could have done an amazing job, but if you can't get your invoice to your clients on time, that then has a huge impact on how they feel about your service. So making sure you are invoicing. With my clients, I say you've got 24 hours from the end of the job or the end of the stage to get that invoice to the clients. My preference is, where possible, if you have a trades business where you can invoice them on the day of, or you can take payment on the day of, then do that. If you are doing bigger jobs and the invoice needs to happen, you might need to make some adjustments before it gets sent out, then please make sure that you are doing that within 24 hours of that job or that stage finishing. Now, the other thing I hear here a lot is that, I'm so busy, I don't have time to invoice. That you have to make time to invoice. Don't go and do more jobs until you get on top of your invoicing, because there's no point doing the work if you are not giving anyone the ability to pay you for that work. That is a fast track to disaster, and please make sure that you stop that right away. So you've reduced your expenses, you've got your invoicing up to date. The other things you could do to fill in some gaps is you could look at your scheduled jobs coming up. Are there some jobs that you could reschedule so that you potentially get some completed sooner, so then you can invoice sooner, which then means you're going to get paid sooner? Are there some little jobs that you've got on the quote pile that you could kind of get across the line and get them to fill in the gaps and get some cash in as well? There's a whole long list of things that we can do that I work with clients on to fix the gaps. But if you start with those three, then that is going to be a great start. The key is we need to be proactive. So don't let your debt just determine what is going to happen in your business. Don't let it determine your mood. Don't let it determine what jobs you don't take. We have to be proactive. Most businesses I work with, probably 98% of businesses have large amounts of debt, and probably again 98% of them just let it roll on. They don't really pay any attention to it, and that is what we want to avoid. We want to be proactive. We want to know exactly what our debt is or what the debts are. We want to get really, really clear on that. We want to map out your cash flow. Now we know how much you owe, how much it's going to cost every month, and when those are due, we can then map out your cash flow and see where those gaps are. We can find those gaps, and most importantly, we can fix those gaps. Your business is here to serve you. And what I see so often is business owners get so inundated with the 101 different things that they need to do in business that they just can't look forward, and they're just doing what they can day to day, sometimes week to week, to get by. And now is the time to make sure that we start being proactive and we start looking forward. And the area that I see and know makes the biggest difference is to get your debt under control and implementing Profit First in your business. getting your debt under control is one of the most critical stages of Profit First. And for any client that has debt in their business, that is the very first spot that I start. Because once you have that debt under control, everything else seems so much simpler and so much more manageable. So if you are the type of business who I mentioned and you have debt, it might have a small amount of debt, you might have quite a large amount of debt, don't ignore it. Now is the time to do something about it. It won't just magically fix itself. I guarantee you of that. So please reach out, click the links, send me an email, katie@profitfirstfortradies.com.au, book in a chat, and let's create a plan that specifically works on your debt and how you can get out of your debt sooner rather than later.